So good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Ucci. I'm proud to be here speaking to you this morning and moderating this panel. I'm a board member of SENEDIA, and I'm also an attorney at Adler, Pollack & Sheehan, managing the Government Contracts Practice Group. This is our 5th year doing this, and it's amazing how we've transformed. 5 years ago, the big topic in this room is how do we get more work? How do we get more work? I need more work. Things aren't good. And now 5 years later, here we are talking, how do I get more people? I have too much work. I have a lot of work, and I need more people. So I would ask our panelists to come up today, who will be joining me to have this lively discussion around our workforce issues. And they are Maura Dunn, Vice President of Human Resources from General Dynamics, Chris Jewell, the President of Collins & Jewell, Tom Spock, the Vice President of Aerospace and Defense, Secor Naval Solutions, and Scott Jensen, our Director of Department of Labor and Training. No one can doubt that we're in a tremendous time right now for our economy and for the industry in general. But if you think of all the things that most of us do here in the room, it has to go somewhere. How do we get it to the warfighter? How do they use it? We need the truck to put it on, or the ship to put it on in our case. So if you think of where we've come in the needs of the shipbuilding industry, we've seen over time really a pull away from the traditional manufacturing economy. So over the last few years, for the last decades, time and time again, we've seen schools push people more to college rather than trade school. We've seen jobs that people thought could be career jobs evaporate. So people have pushed students and young people to go out and avoid or not go into the trades. In the spring of 2017, the Eisenhower School of National Security and Resource Strategy said, and I have to read this to you because it was so interesting, the hollowing of skilled trade is a direct result of America's educational policies, which have focused on steering nearly all young people toward college, while greatly reducing, in many cases, abandoning education in skilled trades. In short, the United States has neglected the technical schools which fund the skilled labor force. And now, because of that, we have that trickle down that we're now faced with in attempting to get these skilled workers into the workspace. So I will ask first to speak to us, you'll hear from Maura Dunn. Maura is the Vice President of Human Resources at GD Electric Boat. And prior to that, she spent 9 years at General Dynamics Advanced Information Systems, where she was the Vice President of Human Resources and Administration. Good morning, Maura.
Good morning. It's a thrill to be here with all of you and talking about what I think is a super important issue to the regional economy in New England, which is workforce development. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to sit next to Admiral Johnson during lunch, and I asked him what kept him up at night, and he basically said to me, I worry that Electric Boat and the supply chain won't find the workers it needs to be able to deliver all the ships the nation needs. He went on to say, he did give us credit for having done a lot of work to get ready for it, but he said, I need for you to work with the supply chain and to ensure that they understand how far-reaching and massive the problem is. And if you think about the slides that Admiral Johnson shared with us yesterday, he identified as one of the top issues for the government that they needed to work on developing their own workforce. If you think about the same budget figures that he showed yesterday, there was an increase in shipbuilding, and in particular, $21.9 billion will be spent in the next year delivering 2 Virginias, a carrier, 2 LCSs, and the list goes on and on. When you think about that, we're trying to deliver all that work at a time when, if you talk to people who are experts in workforce development, which I really wasn't, but I'm quickly becoming one, they'll talk about middle-skilled people, and that's folks with computer skills and technology, people with high-skill manufacturing abilities. That's estimated to be 48% of the labor workforce, which, if you think about it, is 69 million people. They sometimes have college degrees, sometimes they don't, but it's really people with technical skills that are doing the highly technical work we need to deliver ships, components, and to engage in cyber warfare, which we heard is really important. If you think about closer to home in defense, the cluster between Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and I find this stunning. All three of those states, if you look at it, the top 5 states in our country for defense expenditures are Virginia, California, Texas, Connecticut, which seems shocking to most people, and then next, number 5 is Massachusetts. If you had looked at that list a couple of years ago, Connecticut and Massachusetts wouldn't have been in the top 10. And that's a result of the increase in shipbuilding here. If you think about defense per capita, as we heard from Congressman Cicilline, that ranking is pretty solid too. Connecticut ranks number 10, Massachusetts is number 18, and Rhode Island comes in at number 12. So clearly there's a huge amount of defense expenditure in our region, and that drives this large number of needs. And if you think about how we traditionally developed that workforce, we had 2 approaches. We sent people to college. That was one plan. And if you think about who's going to college, the percentage of our workforce that's headed towards STEM has basically been stuck at 15% for decades. So that's a great source of talent, but not necessarily the talent that we need to deliver all the engineering skills that we need. In addition, the second way that we developed talent was apprenticeships, traditional apprenticeships, primarily in the union workforce environment, and that programming is down 36% since 1998. So our basic ways of delivering our workforce don't exist anymore. So we've had to look for, if you think about it, in the last 4 years, Electric Boat has grown from 12,000 people to over 17,000 people between our locations, primarily in Connecticut and Rhode Island. To do that, we've had to hire over 14,000 people, which means we really had to think about how do we develop that workforce. And we kind of fell into this by accident, but we really went about looking for people who shared our pain, which were in many instances our suppliers, particularly in Connecticut and Rhode Island. And we made it and got great assistance from both states, Connecticut and Rhode Island, from the state government, because they felt the pain when we explained to them that we were struggling to find the workforce that we needed. Together, we've really used in Connecticut, the Connecticut Southeastern Workforce Investment Board. If you think about them as defense contractors, you're used to thinking about integrators. And if you think about a network integrator, that's really the role that the Real Jobs Rhode Island program has performed for us and that Eastern Connecticut Workforce Investment Board has. They bring together like stakeholders, policymakers, and they help us try and develop the common ground that we've needed to solve this problem. We've worked together to build a skills ecosystem, and I want to tell you that I think as you think about that huge ramp up and what's coming, Admiral Johnson told us yesterday 14 ships plus or minus was what was being commissioned and deployed. That was, as he said, a low point for us in terms of what's coming. Building the ecosystem that is allowing us to deliver workers today has taken 3 to 5 years. So we all need to come together and push this forward. If you think about the results that we've delivered from our programming here, we've had a 90% placement rate out of our programs in Connecticut and Rhode Island. 90%. You don't see a lot of federal programs that have that kind of return on investment. We've experienced a reduction in our attrition for first-year people, which if you think about it, in our case, investing in a welder is probably $30,000. So saving a couple of percentage points on that, whether you're a big business or a small business, you can recognize what an impact that will have on your bottom line. And then lastly, if you think closer to home in terms of what really matters, which is the quality of our product, we've seen workers coming out of our pipeline programs in both states see considerably lower rejection rates in terms of their quality levels. In fact, in the case of copper nickel pipe, which is a pretty specialized process if you think about it, we've seen a rejection rate go from 13.7% to just about 5% through the period of through the process of having people come out of these programs. So all in all, pretty incredible story, but we all have to work together, big businesses and small businesses, to make sure the workforce is there, because it's not going to be there just by waiting. As you pointed out, Steve, a lot of that infrastructure is missing in action now.
Thank you, Maura. It's an incredible story about what Electric Boat has done over the last few years. Now we hear from Chris Jewell, who is the Chief Financial Officer and Principal of Collins & Jewell, a custom fabrication and industrial installation firm located in Connecticut.
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So Collins and Jewell Company, we're a company that's located in Bosworth, Connecticut, and we are a part of the supply chain for Electric Boat. Electric Boat has become one of our biggest customers over the last 4 or 5 years as a result of their growth. And we provide for them a lot of fixture work, support work that helps them build the boat, some R&D work, and now we are starting to go through the process of getting shipboard work. So we're evolving with Electric Boat's evolution and their future needs. That being said, with the growth of that marketplace for us, we really saw a need for more workforce. So we had some attrition, we had people retiring, we had people that we had our workforce aging, but more importantly, we needed more people. And we were really struggling getting more people in the trades world. I have 2 daughters, both of which, one just went into college, the other is still in high school. And it was interesting, when their sophomore year, they were asked to do a survey online where basically it kind of tells them which direction they may be pushed towards education-wise and career-wise. It was like a career thing. And I went through it with them, and I was very surprised how biased that was towards really college pathways. There were no, do you work well with your hands? Do you like to change oil in the car? Do you have any mechanical aptitude? There's really no direction that way. So it really intrigued me, and I went to the school and I said to them, you really need to relook at this, because yeah, you want to send kids to college, but you don't realize that 50% of incoming college freshmen don't graduate. So where do they go? So if you help direct them in the right path from the get-go, then they can have success. So I really am a big believer, and you can't complain about the problem if you're not willing to be part of the solution. So I said, okay, here's our problem. What am I going to do to solve it? So essentially, I started off by getting involved with a group called EMA, which is the Eastern Advanced Manufacturing Alliance. It's a group of 64 manufacturers all east of the Connecticut River that work together for the sole purpose of workforce development. We all acknowledge the same problem, and we're all working to solve that. So through that process, we kind of determined that, well, one of the good ways to help this is, if we can't deal with it at the high school level, let's deal with it at the community college level. Let's look at training programs, credit or non-credit, that can get people to the workforce quicker with those basic skills that we need. So that led me to say, okay, well, the only way you can help the community college get on board is to get involved with the community college. So I joined the Three Rivers Community College Foundation Board and started going to the meetings and meeting all the people and getting involved in that. So then Eastern Workforce Investment Board started getting involved. So they were going to create what they call the manufacturing pipeline, which has been very successful, and I got some statistics I want to go over with that after. And Eastern Workforce Investment Board really was the vetting and the transitional process for unemployed, underemployed people to get into this pipeline program that Three Rivers Community College created. Now, mind you, when Three Rivers Community College created it, they didn't take an out-of-the-box solution. They worked with industry, they worked with Electric Boat, who was also an EMA member, and we all worked together to create curriculum that we knew would fit well for our needs. So we needed a vessel to get people to that pathway. So Eastern Workforce Investment Board, through the American Jobs Center, created a portal that allowed people to take some basic skills aptitude tests, get them signed up and registered for these training programs. And these training programs, mind you, are not multi-year programs. They go anywhere from 7 weeks to 15 weeks. So it's something where somebody can get from a unemployed situation to a real job offer very, very quickly, and a high-paying job offer. That's the other thing that a lot of people outside of industry don't realize is, entrance level for these positions is, between $15 and $17 an hour. You're talking about somebody who their other option is Starbucks making $10 an hour, $11 an hour. So it's a significant difference. And we're talking about a career versus a job. This is something where that's a starting point. So the sky's the limit. I mean, if you look at Electric Boat, for instance, and the amount of people that are in their management structure that started off as shipbuilders, it's mind-boggling. You don't typically see that in an organization like that. So there's a lot of promotion from within, a lot of opportunity. Same thing in my business. So realistically, at that point was when I said, okay, EWIB seems like they're the vessel to get people there. I might as well join that group too. So I got involved in the Eastern Workforce Investment Board. I joined the board and recently became the chair of that board. So I'm really proud of a couple of things. The funding for this program, and I'm going to talk about the program first. I think it makes more sense to do that. So the program itself, the Pipeline Initiative, we've had, so some of the statistics on it, which I think is really exciting, is we've had over 1,023 job placements in the of graduates from the pipeline manufacturing program. So that's a 90% placement rate. So that means 90% of the people who take the program get a job in manufacturing. That being said, only 22% of all of the people who went through the program had prior manufacturing experience. So 78% had no prior experience whatsoever. So it really was a good way to get people without any manufacturing into this this area very quickly, again, in a 10 to 15 week time period. The economic impact, because there's a multiplier effect with manufacturing jobs, of those 1,023 jobs was about 2,500 direct and indirect jobs in the area of Connecticut, which equals about $88 million in annual wages. So again, we've done this in about a 2-year time period, and it's really had excellent results. We've done over 1,500 industry assessments. We've had, again, 1,023 placements. We've had over 600 people that have enrolled in the program. It's really exciting to see the growth that the program has had. The other exciting part about it is, again, to Maura's point earlier, the state of Connecticut has been incredibly helpful in acknowledging this problem and dealing with it and helping fund it. So through Eastern Workforce Investment Board, they've applied for a number of state grants where they've gotten huge financial support from the state. And what that financial support from the state and the success of the program has led itself to is, to me, the most exciting part about the success of the program, and that's private investment. So we've had philanthropic investment in this program of about $1.3 million. So that's people that have seen the success of this and said, wow, this is something where I think this is going to be good for my community, good for my region, good for my state. So they've invested over $1.3 million, and that's really amongst 4 different people. So we've just started creating this excitement in the philanthropic community, and we really want to continue to ride that. That being said, where we want to continue to see work and effort is at the federal level. So federally, I think it's important, again, and the work is coming from the federal government, so I understand there's that side of it, but in order to get the work done, we need to have the people. And the federal government really needs to look at these programs and say, okay, A, how can we support it financially, and B, how can we help mimic it in other areas and regions that need it? What I will tell you is the key to success is to have all players involved, both small and large business, have agencies in your government that are willing to look at this from a what's the best financial impact of that money directly to the result. So in other words, low administration costs. You hate to see 25% administration costs on grants and things like that when that money could go towards the actual goal that it ends up needing to go to. So it's really exciting to see what's going on in Connecticut. We're really happy about it. And the biggest thing that I would say is to have an industry partner like Electric Boat or whomever the large organization is that needs this workforce, to have them act in conjunction with the supply chain. So I always say, the supply chain are a bunch of gazelles and Electric Boat's the elephant. But the nice thing about Electric Boat is they're an elephant that acts like us gazelles. And that makes it a lot easier to interact and work together. I'm often reminded of a comment that the president of Electric Boat, Jeff Geiger, made, where he was talking about this manufacturing pipeline and the success of it. And he says, it's all well and good, but with what we've got coming up, we need 10 more of these. So that's really, I think, the point of this discussion is how can we replicate it, how can we grow it, how can we ramp it up and get it to where, instead of having 1,000 placements, we have 10,000 placements. So,
Chris, thank you for your leadership on this. That's an amazing story here. You've taken the bull by the horns, and also a nice display of how to interact with your customer when praising them. So good job. So lesson learned from all of us.
It's
The elephant and gazelle. I didn't know where that was going. But
I wouldn't say it if
came
it
back.
wasn't true.
Next, we have Tom Spock. Tom is the Vice President, Aerospace and Defense of Sercor Aerospace. Sercor designs and manufactures highly engineered pumps and valves and supports EB with its submarine programs. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I'm part of Sercor Naval Solutions. We're located in Warren, Massachusetts. Warren's located in a very rural area between Worcester and Springfield, and we employ about 150 people. Our division was acquired by Sercor International in December of last year, and they were very excited about acquiring another defense business, and it's particularly one with the long history that we have. For over 80 years, we have supplied highly engineered pumps and valves to Electric Boat. For many years, our business was very stable, with minimal turnover and moderate growth. We could handle, the people issues. About 4 years ago, at a program review meeting with Electric Boat, we discussed our capacity to accommodate the combined production from Virginia-Columbia, along with other shipbuilding programs that we're involved with. We developed the rate readiness plan for both our pump and valve business, and while each business had different operational constraints, both plans address human resource needs, which we felt was absolutely critical to the success of our growth. To deal with the operational capacity, it was all about money. We invested about $8 million in the past 2 years in machining equipment for the valves and then a new test center for our pumps to meet the new requirements for Columbia. And as we began our migration to this new equipment, we quickly identified training as an absolutely critical bottleneck that was affecting the implementation. Our new equipment requires highly trained technicians, primarily engineers and CNC programmers, and machinists with new skills. In conjunction with this capacity increase, we are facing a large turnover in our highly tenured workforce due to retirements. We're experiencing 4 to 5 retirements per year, and on top of that, with each departure, we lose 35 to 40 years of experience. And just to give you some idea of the demographics, about 75% of our machinists are over the age of 50, and 30% are planning on retiring in the next 5 years. So we have some work. At least we are faced with 2 critical workforce challenges. First, how do we develop and train people to operate our new equipment? And secondly, how do we effectively transfer hundreds of years of tribal knowledge to this new workforce? It's daunting, to say the least, but we are working on it. We have a plan. We are fortunate in Massachusetts to have a very good vocational high school and technical community colleges nearby to draw from. We have reestablished our partnership with the local vocational school, Pathfinder Regional, to help feed our apprentice program to fill our skilled direct labor positions. There are several postgraduates from Pathfinder on our team who have worked for the company for many years, so we expect this partnership will lead to the next generation of workers. My wife's actually an 8th grade science teacher in town, and I think Chris mentioned about vocational schools, and it was interesting that she told me the other day that several of her top students are actually applying to vocational school. So we're encouraged that there should be a very strong talent pool to draw from in the future from that program, and it's right in our backyard almost. However, to transfer these graduates to our work environment, we established an apprentice program about 2 years ago, and our plan is unionized, so we need to get the support from the union for this program, and they completely embraced it and are excited about it. The program takes from 6 months to a year, depending on the experience of the individual, and I think it's an excellent way to assess a prospective new employee and vice versa. In the past year, 2 machinists have progressed through the program into productive associates, and we have several others in the pipeline as well. We're also considering a co-op program, which is very similar to the apprentice program, but it takes longer and has more administrative burden for us because the candidates are generally high school age. The cost of these apprentice and co-op programs has so far been absorbed by our company. And as we need to add many skilled direct labor positions over several years, we're looking into grants and other state programs to help defer these costs and to help with the training process. Our new HR manager, which is part of why we hired her, she's got some really good experience with training grants, and we're anxious to get her working on this. The first area to focus with the training will be to help us formalize a train-the-trainer program to assist with this tribal knowledge transfer, which is absolutely critical. Additional training, we also plan additional training for our frontline management, which we think is essential to help guide our aging workforce through the transition, as they naturally are going to have fears about giving up their knowledge. And even as we hire experienced workers, I think Maura mentioned, we are also faced with training these experienced people and qualifying them with our equipment and processes. And I also have a welder example where it could take 3 months or sometimes longer, to get a welder productive as they have to progress through a very, very rigorous qualification program. And as big a challenge as we have filling skilled direct labor positions, we're also finding an equal struggle to fill and retain key professionals. And this is particularly an issue with technical talent. There's a tremendous amount of competition, and attracting talent to our rural location has been difficult. We're competing with companies in the metropolitan Boston, Hartford areas, and many of you in this room as well, including Electric Boat. To combat this, we are becoming much more active at job fairs at local universities. We have alum from Worcester Poly, Mass Maritime, and UMass School of Engineering as 3 examples. We're also conducting salary surveys to understand where we need to be to remain competitive and to be proactive in the retention process for key performers. That's becoming a critical issue for us. And it's also important to get our name out in the local community and gain a reputation as a great place to work with a bright future. I look forward to the discussions today and to share our experience and to learn from everyone in attendance. Thank you.
Tom, thank you. Thank you for enlightening us on how you're managing that transition through the tribal knowledge, because that can be very difficult. It's great to bring in new folks who are trained, but the secret sauce is always important to figure out a way to capture that and to share it. SENEDIA, an important aspect of SENEDIA is not only putting on fine events like this and our tech talks, but also getting together to work with you all for workforce development. SENEDIA has done that for many years, and to identify the skills gap and try to reach out through our STEM initiatives and our employment opportunities and internship programs. Very important, and the work of our staff has been tremendous. We've had a tremendous amount of support from our Department of Labor and Training. Our next speaker is Scott Jensen, who is the Rhode Island Director of Department of Labor and Training, and he leads Governor Raimondo's skills agenda designed to give Rhode Islanders the tools to succeed in the 21st century economy. And I must also add that in his department is the hardest working man in state government, Matt Weldon, who works for him.
It's true.
So, Scott, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. How are you? I've noticed that since we've started, there are more people on this side of the room than on that side of the room. So welcome, everybody. I want to start just by saying, starting how I typically start when I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk with a group of business owners and be on a panel with business owners is, hi, my name's Scott Jensen. I work for the Department of Labor. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. I'm glad you all laughed, because that is a difficult value proposition to actually pull off. And I want to talk very briefly about the work we've done here in Rhode Island with General Dynamics Electric Boat, and in particular the Real Jobs Rhode Island program, because it has worked. And, I'll just kind of go quickly, but I think the best way to begin is to just kind of contrast it with the old way. The old way of doing workforce development is a supply-side approach. So it's not complicated. There are a lot of people who need jobs, and you start with them, you figure out what they want to do, you help them get skills to do it, and then you go out into the market and you try to find them a job. We were, before the Raimondo administration, Rhode Island was doing it that way. And let me just give you some results. We had a federal grant to do that work. We succeeded in placing exactly 3 people at General Dynamics. We trained significantly more people for significantly more money, and since we're coming up on the World Series, we had a .050 batting average. We repurposed that grant money. Don't worry, please tell the administration. We did something different with it. What Real Jobs Rhode Island does, first off, I'll give you some buzzwords. It's a sector-based workforce, sector intermediary-based demand sector-based workforce program. Sorry, that was a failure of verbiage. This is not a new approach. You bring a number of companies together in a sector. General Dynamics is its own sector in Rhode Island, along with its supply chain. So your colleagues in Rhode Island. What we do is we are aggressive about demand. So it's a radical concept, but you start with what the employer needs, and then you reverse engineer into what is really a vast network of community colleges, K through 12 systems, nonprofits that are deeply connected into our communities, who can find that person who would make a great welder if they have a little bit of training. To give you an idea of scale, in the last year and a half, we've placed about 1,500 people at Electric Boat successfully, with the kind of success rates that you heard Maura talk about. So the old way supply, the new way demand. And I think we've been successful, and I think we're excited about growing further. Let me just characterize next what an aspect that makes us successful. We're agile. We really are agile. We heard that word come out in earlier discussions. It's important, and what I think the best example of that is, we let Electric Boat choose and screen which employee they want us to train, and then we train them. That gets very difficult because we have a number of funding streams we use, and some of those funding streams are earmarked to individual communities. So people who are underemployed, people who are unemployed. So if General Dynamics picks somebody, our job is then to see what are the characteristics of that person that qualify them for one of our streams. So that takes a lot of work, and frankly, it's expensive to do from an administrative perspective. We are constantly behind the scenes working very hard to untangle red tape to the tune of about $1 million a year. So to your point about overhead, it takes a lot of work so that the companies we're trying to serve don't have to do it. So and also, I just add to your tribal knowledge characterization, which I thought was excellent. That's a big problem. There are people who probably have been working at some of your companies for a couple of years who show up every day, who are great, and if we can be flexible enough to do an incumbent worker training program that doesn't have a lot of requirements to it, so that that tribal knowledge gets passed on, we need the agility to do that. I'd point out that, Stephen, to your point, that SENEDIA is a leader in this regard. Molly McGee is back there, and her team absolutely do amazing work. And SENEDIA is a Real Jobs Rhode Island grant partner, so you would get an idea of kind of who leads the show. And I just want to end with what what I think are challenges right now, and I want to first start with what it isn't. There is, I think, a myth that the young kids with their cell phones don't want to do manufacturing and don't want to do shipbuilding. And what we worried about that when we started. And we have a series of CTE programs we built in 17 different schools around the state with the leadership of General Dynamics. And we were worried that we were going to have to do a PR campaign. Maybe we can get Taylor Swift to talk about how cool it is to shipbuild, get the young kids involved. Well, guess what happened? When that first cohort graduated and they got $50,000 a year jobs and they told their friends about it, all of a sudden we can't keep them out of the program. So this idea that people don't think shipbuilding is cool is wrong, because it is cool. It's fascinating, and it's really important, and same with manufacturing. So that's not our challenge. What our challenge is we have just, in our Real Jobs Rhode Island efforts, started to address the challenges that electric boat has for a workforce. We have not begun to scratch the need of the even more demand for all of the suppliers. Which is going to be a little bit harder, because it's easy to talk with Maura and find out what General Dynamics needs, but now we have a lot of convening work to do with hundreds of smaller companies and some pretty elaborate plans to put together, which I know we can do, because we've all done it in various ways in our state. So we need to do the supply chain. Just so you realize scale, Rhode Island is a tiny state, 1 million people. It's the size of a county in most states. We have committed this year to $5 million in state funds that's going to go to electric boat alone. That's out of $20 million. And $20 million is a national record for an investment in sector-based workforce development. Ed Rendell's Pennsylvania in the 90s is our benchmark in that context. So Rhode Island is really stepping up, but it can take about half of it when it comes to this sector, and now we need to help the smaller supply chain companies. And the federal streams, largely from United States Department of Labor, those streams are supply driven. They are rightfully aimed at helping certain parts of the workforce get in the game. And the problem with that is it's very tricky to administer. So I'd leave you with this sort of analogy. What we have here is a challenge that requires something like unleaded gasoline. We have a motor. We're ready to go. But we have a lot of diesel fuel around. So we need unleaded fuel, and I'm hopeful we can talk about how we're gonna get the right fuel. I think that some help from the Defense Department, so that we can be able to really make sure that we give these great companies the workforce they need, so we can get it done for the country.
Great, thank you, Scott.
Yep.
So now I get to put all of you on the hot seat and ask these questions that have come up while we're standing here. So, good to see Molly's here. I see she came in. You made bail from last night, Molly. Glad to see you got here in one piece. Good to see you. Judge was very friendly. He appreciated our workforce development work at SENEDIA.
I think she knows a guy.
So, exactly. So, Scott, your first one on the hot seat. So, let's say I own a company. We call it UCI Capacitor, and I'm the small business of the globe, and I get all these awards, but I need people. What do? I need people. What do I do?
Well, every time I get to spend any time with my colleague and friend Nora Dunn, I learn new words. So network integrator is a great one. What if you're a supply chain company in Rhode Island and you're working with General Dynamics, you would work with Maura and her team and call us up, and we would sit down and talk with you about what you're going to need by way of a workforce, and we're going to try to we're going to put together a plan to make that happen. Now, what makes our grant and our work in Rhode Island a little bit special is the grant that these folks have allows us to pitch in new projects as they arise, so we can be extremely agile when it comes to actual demand that companies have. Now, what we're going to do, you both have CNC machinist needs. Almost every small manufacturer does. We might say, oh, you need a CNC machinist? Look, we have been working together with CCRI, the community college here in Rhode Island, to put together a CNC machinist program. So we have a new cohort starting. Would you be willing, what are your training needs? Would you be willing to go in with a couple of other smaller companies and start a cohort, almost immediately? And CCRI has been terrific under the leadership of President Hughes to get quick turnaround and be very responsive to demand. And both of us, frankly, are responding to a governor who doesn't have a lot of patience for people who can't be agile and get the work done. So you would work through the sector partnership, which is how we're able to aggregate that demand a little bit in a little bit more of an orderly way and meet it.
So now I have the follow-up. So unfortunately, Electric Boat doesn't buy my capacitors.
Mm-hmm.
Another company does, like that big red company, Raytheon, buys my capacitors. How do if they don't have the same thing, how would I just as myself go to you all? Who would I reach out to?
You would reach out to the Real Jobs Rhode Island program. If you're selling capacitors,
right.
The person's name is Julie O'Connell.
Julie O'Connell, Real Jobs Rhode Island. Okay.
And
write that. Real Jobs Rhode Island.
This is Rhode Island,
Julie
so I'll
O'Connell.
give you my
Right.
cell phone and
Right.
you can call me.
Exactly. Yeah, that's coming next.
And I do feel guilty with Raytheon here, but so
No,
you know,
they can handle it,
because
trust
we're
me.
talking about Electric Boat at the moment, but we have been working very closely with Raytheon to figure out what their needs are, and we just did an effort, 4 whole people at key folks they needed to be more competitive within their company. We were able to turn that around in a couple weeks and get a program that micro going quickly. But agility is the thing.
Great. Thank you, Scott. So what I'll do is I'll open to, are there any questions of the audience as we get back on schedule here? Does anyone have a question? Anyone besides Lou DePalma? Yes. Senator DePalma, my colleague in government.
Yeah. Sure. So, as part of this comprehensive Real Jobs Rhode Island grant program, we didn't just do one-offs. We actually had a facilitated discussion with General Dynamics, the entire administration, really. So what came out of that was 2 colleges, one, the Community College of Rhode Island, and then New England Technical Institute, which is a private college, partnered to work out of Westerly, Rhode Island, which is very near Electric Boat. We built, along with some philanthropic support, a higher education center where this work could happen. If you walk into that higher education center, more than half of it is made to look like an Electric Boat warehouse. There's mock submarines in that building. We try to mimic the working conditions, which means right now it's not air conditioned in there.
That was just cost savings by the state. They're just trying to pass it off. This is the way it'll be when you get there.
And if you go in there in the winter, it's a little chilly. Yeah. Again, cost savings.
Very warm.
But
I could try that with my wife.
It's worth it. And we're seeing folks in Westerly, and I got to shout out a little bit to my colleagues in Connecticut, because we've worked very hard on a cross-border agreement so that we can work as a region. And, that's crucial. We've been in contact with folks in Connecticut, been in contact with my counterpart in Massachusetts, because if we're going to solve this problem, we're going to need to do it together, because it's far bigger. And it's easy for us to say, because we're like tiny Switzerland in the middle, right, of 2 larger states.
Thank you. Sir, you had a question? Yes. Please come forward to the microphone.
Is this on? No?
Yes.
Yeah, on. Hi, George Zavar, Newark, Newport, and Sinmox, Mississippi. Thank you, panels, for a really enlightening discussion. I'm an engineer, so labor workforce is outside my remit, so thus a naive question. There was discussion about there is a need for skilled and unskilled people to come into the pipeline. I think the Connecticut delegation expressed that. Yet I will note that there is a large number of young people in the inner cities that are adrift and need some guidance. They're perhaps going down the wrong path. there's a perception of there's not a lot of good paying jobs in the area in there. And I suspect that there would be a pretty good talent for a labor pool if they were redirected. Now, I'd say to the gentleman from Rhode Island, you might have addressed this, sir, because by the very nature of Rhode Island being a very small community, that the inner city is relatively close to large employers. But for Connecticut, where we have underemployed in Hartford and in Bridgeport and further west, how do we bring these programs to the inner cities or elsewhere where there's, I would say, a lot of young people, perhaps adrift, that could be helped if given direction, being brought into the labor pool? Thanks.
So interestingly enough, we have in Eastern Connecticut right now 2 beta tests, I'll call them for lack of a better term. They're ECHO programs, early college opportunity programs, where we have Wyndham High School and New London High School. So 2, we'll say, cities in Eastern Connecticut. Our cities are a lot smaller in Eastern Connecticut, but that have that demographic that you're talking about, and we're marketing to the high school age students from freshmen on up to join into this early college opportunity program. So Three Rivers is working with New London High School and their STEM program, and Winnebago Valley Community College is working with Wyndham High School. We've had actually huge success in enrollment year over year. So it started off slow, but it's really gained momentum. And we're really having, Electric Boat's very committed to that. They've gotten mentors involved. I'm actually a mentor of 2 Wyndham kids myself. It's really encouraging to see that start to take hold. When you look at the other communities like Hartford and Bridgeport, I think the focus is more aerospace in those areas. So I don't know that we would be able to pull for our purposes so much in those communities, but I know regionally at least I can say it's happening in those 2 eastern communities currently as we speak. So.
We are also working through the Eastern Connecticut Workforce Investment Board with New Haven's Workforce Investment Board. As we've learned from our demographics, people are willing to drive about 50 miles. And then once we get outside of that 50-mile range for a skilled job, you start to see dips with attrition, you start to see attrition issues. So for us, really, we can get to the East Hartford area, which we are doing, and then we're working through the New Haven Workforce Investment Board with similar programming. So you're starting to see the state of Connecticut serve again as an integrator for us, using the workforce investment boards as the vehicle to do that. So the programming that we have developed, which mirrors what we need at the community college levels and even in the high school curriculums, is starting to make its way westward in Connecticut to that more urban area.
And, in Rhode Island, the plan that we've developed with Electric Boat, like I mentioned earlier, but I can elaborate just for a sec, work goes into, right now, 17 different high schools around the state into their CTE programs. And then we've taken another step, which is you may notice that people go into careers that they have been exposed to, because those, what it means to be in that career has become real for them, and they have an interest in it. So we just this summer started an internship program called Prepare Our Eye that gives rising juniors the opportunity to have a paid summer internship paid by the state, so that those students it's competitive, it's hard to get in, and that those students can get some experience in different businesses, because you have to find out what somebody likes in order for them to be excellent at it. And your observation's right, though. If you're living in a tough zip code, you shouldn't let that zip code determine your life, and you might need to know what amazing opportunities are in a local economy.
So really, it's clear that we companies have to put skin in the game and open the opportunities. And talking about shadowing, mentors, field trips, outreach to the community. I think that's an important part to raise the level of education and awareness. So we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Maura, it's Tim Oliver from the Naval Submarine League. I was listening to your numbers, and I just wanted to make sure I understood. You talked about 12,000 employees, and then went to 17,000, and that was over how long?
Did that in 4 years.
4 years.
So, and part of what's driving that, Tom Spock spoke very well to that, but it's not attrition. The people we're hiring are staying. What's driving that is that if you look at aerospace industry, I saw one fact from Harvard Business Review, which is a pretty reputable source, that 40 to 60% of the aerospace and defense industry is eligible to retire within 5 years. And what we're seeing at Electric Boat is that we've been saying that for a long time. I think the HR community in particular has been rather alarmist with those statistics, but we're finally seeing the realization of that. And when it happens, having 30, 45, 50, 55 years of knowledge walk out the door is a real challenge.
My question was, did I understand you say that you had hired 14,000?
Yes. To have growth of 5,000 plus or minus, we've had to hire 14,000. To deliver the Columbia and Virginia programs simultaneously, we have to hire another probably 18,000. And that's, again, driven by the transition of our workforce. If you look at it today, about 30% of our trade workforce and about 40% of our management team is eligible to retire within 5 years. So that's what's generating. If you look at our attrition, particularly people who've come out of these pipelines, we're seeing very low attrition. It's less than like 8%, which is unheard of. I know when I had worked in Washington, D.C., if I had seen 8%, I'd have put my feet up on my desk and taken the rest of the day off, because 25% is pretty normal down there.
My observation is this SENEDIA and this effort up here is amazing, but it's clear the challenge is tremendous. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to take this time to thank our panelists for coming, and we have the famous SENEDIA coin that we'll be presenting to all of them. And thank you for your candor in enlightening us on this topic. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thanks.